Greetings and welcome to week 15 in our convene class in the book of Genesis. This is the next to last week of class, and we are covering now the final section of the book of Genesis in this week, chapters 39 through 50. A couple of things I'd like for you to give attention to as you study from your commentaries and as you work this week, reading the text once again. Notice, first of all, chapter 39 begins with Joseph and Potiphar's wife, Potiphar and then Potiphar's wife. Give attention to the way Joseph declares that he cannot yield to the temptation that Potiphar's wife offers to him. Joseph is often held up as if he were the hero of this story, the moral example. The danger of interpreting Genesis in that way, then whenever Joseph fails, which he did earlier in his life, you've got this hero with feet of clay. Notice how Joseph himself, though, interprets it. How can I do this to God, and how can I do this to my master? How can I break faith in relationships? And so it's instructive the way that he resists the temptation. So give attention to that. You have the story of Joseph's imprisonment then as a result of Potiphar's jealous anger. You have the dreams of the butler and the cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh's own dreams that Joseph is summoned to interpret as he interprets the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of harvest. And you have Joseph's advancement or promotion to be the second in the kingdom of Egypt. All of that happens relatively quickly as the narrative unfolds, and then it seems to slow down as the account of the famine develops, and that Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to buy grain, and they do not recognize Joseph. He recognizes them. The emotional quality that takes place through this whole section. And then the kind of testing that Joseph puts his brothers through to sort of ascertain whether they have made the kind of progress relationally that he can trust them. He wants to care for his father. He wants to care for Benjamin. There may be a bit of revenge in the way he treats them. But at any rate, that slows the narrative down and the tension builds because you're wondering what's going to take place. Will he be reunited to his father? All of those sorts of things. And then, of course, do give attention to the moment of the revealing of himself to his brothers and the offer of forgiveness, the grace that he extends at that point. To jump ahead to the very end of the book after the father's, Jacob's death. And the brothers are now worried that now Joseph will exact revenge against them. Notice that key interpretive line, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, or the Lord meant it for good. Not that the Lord had engineered their selling him into slavery into Egypt, their hatred of him. He was responsible for their hatred of him. But that God had worked those circumstances to accomplish good, not just for Joseph, not just for Jacob and the sons, but for the good of a major part of the ancient civilized world at that time. Very, very important piece there. The final thing I'd like for you to give attention to is the last words of Jacob, and the blessing that he extends to each of the 12. In particular, give attention in chapter 49, starting in verse 8 through verse 12. The blessing that's given to Judah and the relationship. This text doesn't make clear, but this appears to be a text that influences even the interpretation of Jesus riding in Jerusalem on the colt of the donkey. And so there's a significant promise made to Judah and thus to the leadership of the tribe of Judah that unfolds in the history of Israel that lies ahead. So give attention to the blessings in general in chapters 48 and 49, and in particular to the blessing that's given to Judah. As you read, give thought to Borgman's interpretation of this section and whether you would agree with him on how he sees this culmination of the work of God in the book of Genesis. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.